Welcome to another GGRecon interview. This time we sit down with Ian Bates, also known as Red Shirt Guy, who almost 10 years ago was part of one of the most iconic gaming moments when he asked World of Warcraft developers during a BlizzCon panel what had happened to Falstad Wildhammer. Recognizing that they had made a mistake, the devs promised to get that fixed for him. The clip went viral and Ian was eternalized as the Red Shirt Guy. Since then, he has asked questions several times at the World of Warcraft panel at BlizzCon. Welcome, Ian. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, it's not quite 10 years yet, right?
I'm trying to remember the exact date. It will be exactly 10 years on October, 22nd.
Right. So, over 10 years, you've also appeared several times on BlizzCon panels.
I've been at every BlizzCon since, and I've asked questions at most of the panels. A couple years I was not selected. I think 2018 was one of them.
Right.
But other than that, I've been there ever since.
That's pretty crazy to think that 10 years is a long time, especially in gaming. How has that moment sort of shaped or influenced your life, you think?
Oh, it has shaped it quite a bit. It's been a while, mainly with the pandemic, but I will still occasionally get recognized just out in public. Most recently was, I think, around December of last year. I was at Best Buy getting a Christmas present for my dad, and there was a guy there who recognized me as the Red Shirt Guy.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Of course, you've also gotten the in-game character. That one is still there, right?
Yes, the Wildhammer Fact Checker. He's still there in Ironforge. Whenever I'm in the city, I go and visit him.
Very good. Do you still play World of Warcraft?
Yes. I'm very excited for Shadowlands.
Do you? How do you play? Do you quest a lot? Do you raid? What do you do in World of Warcraft?
I quest a lot. I like collecting things like mounts and pets. I used to raid, but about the time I went to college, I didn't have time for it anymore, so I took a little while off and stuck to LFR. But then when I had a bit more free time, I tried to get back into it, and I've come to find just the organizing and retrying just a bit too stressful. So I'm kind of retired from progression raiding at the moment. Right. I still try to do every raid at least once to get all the story moments.
Are you the type of person that just plays one character, or do you play multiple?
I have two primary characters, one Horde, one Alliance. And I have a couple other characters just for other optional content like the Class Order Halls and Legion, and I'm going to have a character for each Covenant and Shadowlands so I can get all their stories.
We noticed that you're very active about Shadowlands on your Twitter.
Yes, I thought that it would be a good way to help with having a beta key and providing feedback.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. So how are you enjoying it so far?
I like it a lot. I love when Blizzard gets to do a setting that doesn't have a lot of pre-established details, because they're at their best when they're just creating a whole world, whole cloth. That's when their world building's the most exciting, like Pandaria, or Zandalar and Kultiris, which we knew about, but we didn't really know that much about.
Is there a zone that you enjoyed the most so far?
Revendreth. I love how when you leave the first little starting section called Pridefall Hamlet, you reach this walkway, and it is on a sheer cliff, and you see the entirety of the zone out before you, and it's just kind of amazing to think, wow, normally that looks like little fake vistas you'll see in a raid where you can't actually go there, but no, that's the entire rest of the zone. You can go to all of it.
Oh yeah, that's yeah. So
they have a similar view in Ardenweald too, actually. I wonder if they're doing it on purpose.
Right. Yeah, that's a like you mean the cinematic vision of it? All like the
No, it's not a cinematic. That's just when you're playing, you get out there and you see it.
Okay.
Just when you're walking around.
Right. Makes sense, yeah. So you've asked a question at multiple BlizzCon panels. Of course, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, you won't get the opportunity this year.
I was, on one hand, I was looking forward to it being the 10th anniversary, but on the other hand, with everything that's going on, I'm glad they made the decision to cancel BlizzCon, it would not have been a good idea to hold it with the pandemic as it is.
No, most definitely wouldn't have been. That's very true. Do you, like, during your time playing Shadowlands, were there any questions that popped up where you're just like, oh, I wonder where this is going, or I wonder if there's an inconsistency here that I don't understand that doesn't really line up? Or
one thing I have been thinking about, which has especially come into interest with the release of the Afterlives Ardenweald short yesterday, is that the Shadowlands right now doesn't fully reconcile with how spirits and ghosts have been presented in the past in World of Warcraft. For example, especially with spirits of wild gods and druids and things, we see them in the Emerald Dream, like in the Emerald Nightmare raid after Ursoc dies. You see him at the end of the raid, and you can talk to him, and these spirits in the Emerald Dream. And we see in Afterlives and in Shadowlands itself that no, they don't go to the Emerald Dream when they die, they go to Ardenweald. And I've been wondering how exactly that works. So there is a line where, as Ursoc is waiting to regenerate in Ardenweald before spoiler things happen, and he's told to dream well. So I wonder if maybe it's like a split soul thing, where like the soul's in one place and they're dreaming, and that's what we're seeing in the Emerald Dream when we've seen spirits in there. Is that's the dreams of the ones in Ardenweald?
Yeah, it's always in these fairly emotional moments, like. To us, with the new animated short that came out, of course, it sort of feels like the ultimate sacrifice of Ursoc in that moment. Yeah. Though we can never really be sure if he's actually gone, right?
I think it holds more weight if he is actually gone. But yeah, that was a really good short.
What specifically did you enjoy about that, and how do you think it drives the story forward?
I liked, again, seeing a bit more of the Night Fae as what they do. They're one of the more mysterious covenants in that the others have a somewhat defined role. Necrolords and Maldraxxus are the army. Kyrians are the ones who take souls to the Shadowlands, like we see with them taking Arthas and then Uther at the beginning. And Revendreth the Venthyr are either to redeem villainous souls or send them to the Moth. They're too irredeemable. Whereas Ardenweald, we said they help the wild gods regenerate, but we hadn't really seen much of how that works. And if you're in the beta, they do go into it there too a bit with the main quest line. That kind of helps. I like that the Wild Hunt exists, because I had actually, this is very funny, I like to make up my own expansion concepts I will share on BlizzPlanet that I write for, and sometimes I will get just little details right. Like right before Legion was announced, I did one that had Black Recold as a dungeon, and involved the Emerald Nightmare coming back, though the details otherwise were very different. And this one, I had been thinking of an expansion. I wanted them to incorporate some version of the Wild Hunt, because they're a pretty neat mythological thing from a lot of different parts of Europe.
Yeah.
And now they are in World of Warcraft, though in a very different form than I'd predicted. Still, that's pretty cool.
Just before the interview, you tweeted something interesting. Like you talked about, I suppose, cultural sensitivity. Could you explore that? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Basically, what happened was when I was getting on Discord for the interview, I saw in the Scrolls of Lore community, which is one I've been in on their forums for many years, they were talking about how some of the Loa are not just inspired by Haitian and other Caribbean cultures' voodoo, but have actual names from it, like Bon Samedi is just Baron Samedi, who is a real Haitian Loa and is actually still worshipped by people today. And they were wondering what the implications of that using as a fantasy character. And I shared my opinion, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty good thing, and I should probably share it somewhere where Blizzard might see it. So I put it on Twitter too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's definitely true that the cultural influence of or where World of Warcraft feeds from, sources from, is
I love that it's not just standard European mythology like dragons and dwarves and elves. You can get stuff from pretty much everywhere. It helps make the setting what it is.
Yeah, most definitely.
But it also did remind me of how they said they had to consult with China during the creation of Mists of Pandaria to make sure they didn't do anything offensive. Like, for example, if I remember correctly, Shin Stormstout and Lily had to have their eyes changed because originally they had green eyes. I think Lily still might have green eyes, but I remember at least in the initial posters and in Pearl of Pandaria, the little graphic novel they released, they had to change their eyes from green to gold because they were told that green eyes can be considered a bad thing in Chinese mythology. And so I think they actually ended up referencing in the game because there's a quest line in Pandaria where you meet a Pandaren, I think her name was Kiri Jade Eyes, who turns out to be a witch.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or was it the Jade Witch? Kiri Jade Eyes might be someone else. Let me double check. Second.
Problem. Check that for us.
Yes. Oh wait, no, Kiri Jade is someone else. I'm thinking of the Widow Greenpaw.
Ah, okay. Right.
But yeah, I do think that might have been a reference to the little issue with that. But so, for example, I was just saying that it's interesting. They probably should, just to be nice and make sure there aren't unintentional things, maybe do that for other cultures when they incorporate them.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so let's continue a little bit along the lines of the Afterlife series. Of course, one of the longest-standing characters that have been with us. His story continues with Uther, and within the theme, there's like this fine line of vengeance against justice. And where do you see Uther going? Is he more like a neutral threat or like a gray type of villain? So is he like neutral evil? Is he chaotic good? Where do you see that developing to?
This is really hard to answer because I know the answer. It's on the beta, and I don't know how much of a spoiler that would be considered for the interview.
Right. I think this viewers consider this a spoiler tag. We're about to be filled in.
Okay, so if you side with the Kyrian Covenant, Uther is one of the main characters in the max level storyline, and at the end he turns good and rejoins the Kyrians.
Oh, that is very exciting. Right.
However, he still stays all darkened and gray at the moment, and the story kind of ends with just him admitting that what he did to Arthas wasn't justice, it was vengeance, and rejoining the Kyrians, but he's still got a long way to go, which will presumably happen over the patches.
It's like you sort of hinted at that, but could you explain or maybe speculate on the connections between like the Lich King, the Maw, and like Shadowlands? It seems like the Shadowlands Afterlife series sort of like not even the Kyrians of Bastion really knew that this dark agent existed. And how do you think this will play into the overall story in Shadowlands? And does this have larger repercussions for the Warcraft story as a whole?
That is one of the things I've been wondering since the expansion's been announced. And I was on a podcast a while back where I kind of speculated on this. Since they first clarified that Frostmourne and the Helm of Domination came from the Shadowlands, not from the Legion, we still, as was originally said, we still don't know exactly how that works. Did they make, especially now that with the stuff that's come out about the Dreadlords? I don't know how much I want to get into, just because some of this is data mining and some of it's spoilers.
Right.
But anyway, the theory I've been sort of nursing since the expansion announcement, I think that the idea of Shadowlands is in part kind of provide a new origin story for the Lich King and the Scourge. I think what they may be going for is perhaps the Lich King and the Scourge have always existed instead of being created by the Legion, and they just usurped it. As, for example, one thing you notice, almost everything from the Scourge has a counterpart in the Shadowlands. Icecrown looks a lot like the Maw. The Helm of Domination, Frostmourne, came from the Maw. The Sand Lane are a lot like the Venthyr. The Kyrians are a lot like the Valkyr. So what I'm thinking, and they even said Maldraxxus is the birthplace of the type of necromancy that would create the Scourge, and their architecture is identical, which actually kind of raises a bit of an issue since they previously said the Scourge's architecture was based on the Nerubians, and we still see their architecture in Wrath of the Lich King,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it's like both. But anyway, so I'm thinking the Lich King as an entity maybe predated all of that. Maybe the Jailer was the original Lich King, is my working theory, and that the Legion just kind of repurposed it for their own ends, and that the Scourge was essentially, again, this is just a theory, the Lich King's attempts to create or reverse engineer the Shadowlands on Azeroth, hence why he kept making things that look like stuff from the Shadowlands.
That is a very exciting theory, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing, I don't know if this is too much of a spoiler, it's from the introductory quest to the Shadowlands, so probably not. Is one thing that leans a lot towards it is that Bolvar mentions that there was always a voice in the Helm of Domination that wasn't his or Arthas's or Nerzul's, but it was something else, and he now understands it was the Jailer.
Okay.
And that had always been in there talking to him and influencing him, which I think leans a lot of credence towards the Jailer is the true or original Lich King idea I have.
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit for those that aren't as deep? What could the Jailer, this entity, be?
That we don't know, because the Jailer and the entire Pantheon of Death are a completely new concept prior to this expansion. From what little has been explained within the beta, is that there are a group of beings called the Eternal Ones, who are the leaders of the Covenants. They each have a title and a name, which I thought is funny. It kind of reminds me of some Marvel characters who are like, name the adjective or verb.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Eternal Ones that we know of are the Arbiter, Carestia, the Archon, the Primus, the Winter Queen, Denathrius, the Sire, and Zoval, the Jailer.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know where they came from, just that they're the Eternal Ones, and they created the different realms of the Shadowlands. And the Jailer is called the Banished One, and he's imprisoned in the Maw. So presumably something bad happened involving him in the past. And that's about all we know.
That's interesting. So would that be just like a layer above everything else happening, like at a cosmic level?
They did say the Shadowlands is completely removed from the Titans, so they're not related to them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say they're on some level of their own.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then even more curious is that there are references to another group called the First Ones, and they seem to be even more mysterious. They built Oribos, the main city, but other than that, we know nothing about them. Some I've seen on forums speculate it could just be another name for the Eternal Ones, but some of the ways they talk about it make it sound like they're different groups. But we know even less about them.
Right. Okay, let's zoom a little bit more into the story and not as far zoomed out, and think about that for multiple expansions now, there's been this grand betrayal due for the Alliance. Do you think Shadowlands will be the theater of a more serious Alliance story in that regard?
I don't know. On one hand, they are really setting up for it with the novel Shadows Rising and certain things that have happened in the beta and PTR for the pre-patch. But it's hard to tell at this point if it's anything that's going to happen in Shadowlands or if they're setting up for the next expansion, the way there was a lot of death-themed content and just pushing the idea of death and necromancy as something beyond just the Scourge in Battle for Azeroth, but obviously none of that came to a head until now. So I can't tell if they're just doing that in regards to setting up an Alliance betrayal or drama for a future expansion, or if it's something that'll happen later in this one.
Right, that makes sense, yeah. I suppose as a closing question, because in many ways, it's sort of like we're having this moment where it's theoretically possible to bring a lot back if we want to, with sort of this new idea of how souls work being introduced, souls from Azeroth, Draenor, and the Warcraft universe at large. With that in mind, if you had to pick who is like one character you'd love to see back in Shadowlands, if you haven't already met him in beta?
By see back, do you mean meet their soul in Shadowlands or bring them back to life?
Probably just meet them in any.
Yeah,
sort of
I would. I'm not sure I would want to bring anyone back to life. That's a good question, though. It would be nice to see Saurfang, I think, just to know, because it's been pretty sad that he got his warrior's death and everything, but now we know he's probably in the moss somewhere, so it'd be nice if we got to rescue him.
That's
Make sure he gets the afterlife he was supposed to get that we see in Shadows Rising.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah, should I go into that? I don't know if that's a spoiler or if that's something, because that might be some context. Basically, I guess this isn't too much of a spoiler. There is a scene in Shadows Rising where Zekon is asking Blansamdi about the afterlife and if it's good, and he's worried about dying, and Blansamdi shows him a vision of Saurfang in the afterlife, and he's with his wife and son, and they're happy, and they're in some sort of afterlife in the Grand, just living together and hunting tall bucks and stuff. And then later, Zekon dies and ends up in the maw, and then Blansamdi brings him back to life, and he's like, "You lied to me." So now I really want to save Saurfang so he can have that.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Sweet. I think we got a lot from this. Also, just to chew on, I think a lot of people want to go in with a new experience, but also a lot of people love to speculate, just like what could come down during those patches. Other than that, thank you, Ian. Love to reconnect and just meet like the phenomena of the past, even though you of course experienced that from a different point of view. But thank you for doing this interview with us.
You're very welcome. It was fun.